Okay, so in this section we're going to be talking about writing equations of lines, but in particular it would be with two lines that are parallel to each other or two lines that are perpendicular to each other. A couple things you got to remember from previous courses that if you have two lines that do not intersect, so let's say these two lines do not intersect. So if you have two lines that do not intersect, and let's assume that they are non-vertical lines. So we're not interested in vertical lines, just two any other lines though, and they don't intersect, and those lines are parallel. And we know that these lines here have the same tilt, the same slope, so parallel lines have the same slope. Right, so parallel lines have the same slope. All right, now when we talk about that, we are talking about non-vertical lines, because remember, vertical lines, their slopes are undefined. So we are talking about two parallel lines that are non-vertical. Okay, now if we have, now the other thing is a perpendicular. So parallel is easy to remember. They have, you can even visualize that they have the same slope, the same tilt here. So if you have two lines that are perpendicular to each other, so let's say we have this line here, I'm going to call L2, L1 rather, and let's say that this slope, the slope of this line is negative 2/3. All right, and then we have another line that intersects it. Now notice this line's falling, so the slope is negative. This line is rising, so the slope's going to be positive. Well, if they're perpendicular to each other, so if these two lines are perpendicular to each other, their slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So this slope here would have to be, if this is negative, it has to be positive, and then the reciprocal 2/3 is 3/2. All right, so that's a relationship between perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals of each other. Okay, they're not opposites, they're negative reciprocals of each other. So don't think they're opposites. The opposite of 5 is a negative 5. All right, the opposite of 2/3 is a negative 2/3. So don't use the word opposites. Say they are negative reciprocals of each other. All right, so suppose that L1, now the symbol for perpendicular is that upside down T, so it looks like these two things are perpendicular to each other, these two segments, but that's the symbol for perpendicular. The symbol for parallel, so you could say this, if this is L1 and L2, if you go back over here, and if you want to remember the symbol for parallel, you could say L1 is parallel to L2. So this is the symbol for parallel right here. So the symbol for parallel. All right, so suppose L1's perpendicular to L2, so suppose these two lines are perpendicular. And let's suppose that the slope of L1 is negative 6. Then the question to you is this, then the slope of L2 is blank. So what do you think that slope is? Well, we just talked about the fact that perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocal to each other. So if this is negative 6, then this has to be positive, and you just take reciprocal of 6. So the reciprocal of 6 is 1 divided by 6, a positive 1 divided by 6. All right, now if you multiply the slopes of two lines that are perpendicular, I mean the symbol for perpendicular, to each other, comma, their product is blank. All right, so let's go back to this one here. So if I take these two slopes, so if I take these two slopes, for example, 3/2 times the slope of the perpendicular line to it is -2/3. So if I multiply, I want you to notice something. Now you can reduce here, but some of you have a little bit difficulty reducing. But remember, 3 into 3 is 1, 3 into 3 is 1, 2 to 2 is 1, 2 to -2 is -1. Okay? But if you just want to go ahead and multiply numerators together, and go ahead and do that. 3 times a -2 is a -6. 3 times 3, 2 times 3 is 6, so you get -1. So if I do the other one, see these two right here? Let's see what we get. Now I'm going to write -6 as -6/1 times 1 over 6. And so again, -6 times 1 is a -6. 1 times 6 is 6, and again I still get a -1. So if you have two lines that are perpendicular to each other, and you multiply their slopes, regardless of what they are, you multiply their slopes, the product is going to be a -1. So put -1 in this blank. All right, now the question is going to be this that you're going to be interested in finding. All right, so here's the question. So use the given conditions. Use the given conditions to write an equation. Oops. So use the given conditions to write an equation in slope-intercept form and here's the information. Number one, you want to write the equation of a line. So write the equation of a line that passes through, or it could say contains, the point -2, 6, and is parallel to the line whose equation is y equals -1/3 x plus 2. Okay, so based on this statement, it is important that you understand that you're looking at two lines. You want to find the equation of this line, and this line goes to this point, and then there's another line that's being involved here, and that's this line. And that these two lines, this line that goes to this point and this line, they're parallel. Okay? And what you're interested in doing is finding the equation of this line using the fact that it goes to this point and the fact that it's parallel to this line. So in terms of a diagram, let's see what it looks like in terms of the diagram. Sometimes looking at this thing visually helps. Now you don't have to do that. Many times though, in terms of a test, you're not going to have time to actually take this information, draw it, and then figure out from there what to do. So you need to go from here straight forward to the point slope form, just like you did with the previous stuff, and then get your answer. But let's just go ahead and graph this line here. So let's graph. Let's graph y equals -1/3 x plus 2. All right, so I'm going to use the slope and y-intercept. So this is in slope-intercept form. Notice that, slope-intercept form. Okay, and so the slope here is -1/3, and the y-intercept is 2. So to graph a line, given the slope and the intercept, you've got to plot the intercept first. So this is your y-intercept. So my y-intercept, the graph's going to cross the x-axis, the y-axis at 2. And I'm going to use the slope, which is rise over run, to find the other point. So my rise is a -1, so that means that from this y-intercept, I'm going to go down 1. And my run is 3, so I'm going to go to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. So there's the other point. And so I'm going to draw the line right here. And that's the line for this one. So that line right here has this equation. So that's what it just graphed. Y equals -1/3 x plus 2. Okay? All right, but what I'm interested in, and it's important that you see this, what I'm interested in is not is not the equation of this line. I don't want to find that. I already know what that is. What I'm interested in is the equation of the line that passes to this point. So here's negative 2, 6. So let's look at negative 2, 6. Negative 2, 6 is here. Okay? And is parallel to this line. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that line. So it's parallel to this line. Now remember, parallel lines. Remember what parallel lines? Parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this line. Make sure okay. So I'm going to draw this line, and I get this line. Okay, now these two lines here. Now notice, I want to find the equation of this line because that's the one that goes to this point. This is the point negative 2, 6. Okay, so I want to find the equation of this line. So I want to know in slope-intercept form y equals something. Okay, I am given that this line is parallel to this line. Well, remember, parallel lines have the same slope. Well, the slope of this line is negative 1/3. So that means that the slope of this line is also negative 1/3. Okay, so the slope of that line is at negative 1/3. And so in the previous lesson, when you're given a point and a slope, what is it that you did? Well, you went straight to point slope form, you plug stuff in, and then you solve for y. And so that's what you're going to do here. All right, so going back to this, remember, we're interested in the equation that goes to this line. So note, the equation of the line that contains negative 2, 6 has slope of, and then you have to know that this line here is parallel to this line. So this line right here has slope of negative 1/3. Then this line here that contains this point also has slope of negative 1/3. That's what we just found. Parallel lines have the same slope. So if this slope, if the slope of this line is negative 1/3 and they're parallel, then the slope that goes to this point that I'm interested in finding also has the same slope. And now you just use point slope form. So use point slope form. Okay, remember point slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And so you just plug your information in. So remember though, you got to this point here, don't substitute into x and y. Never substitute in x and y. You got to substitute into x1, y1. So this is my x1, this is my y1. This is y1. Let me redo it. x1, y1. Okay, so we get y minus 6 equals the slope, which is negative 1/3, times x minus a negative 2. And so you got to rewrite this. Remember, we talked about this. Never, ever, ever leave it as x minus a negative 2. Because when you distribute, you're going to have an issue probably. So rewrite it using some information you learned in previous courses that x subtract a negative 2, you can always change subtraction to addition by adding the opposite. So x subtract negative 2 means x plus a positive 2. Change the sign of negative 2. Or take the opposite of negative 2. So we get y minus 6 equals negative 1/3 times x plus 2. That's what you want to rewrite it as. Now distribute. So remember, this is point slope form. Keep that in mind. That's point slope form. Point slope form. Okay, so we get y minus 6 equals negative 1/3 x. All right, now let's figure out what this is. A negative 1/3 times a positive 2. And we write positive 2 is 2 over 1. So to multiply that out, that's going to be a negative 2/3. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. 3 times 1 is 3. So I get minus 2/3. Okay, so now adding 6 to both sides, and combine like terms, I get y equals negative 1/3 x. All right, now use your calculator on this part here. So if you're not very comfortable writing two fractions with unlike denominators, remember I'm adding two fractions with unlike denominators. You remember you have to find the equivalent fraction, all that. So if you're not too comfortable with that, then go ahead and use your calculator. Now let me go ahead and get the calculator. I forgot to get it. So on your calculator, so remember we're trying to add negative 2/3 and 6. So you're going to say, now remember let me clear this. Your negative button's right here. So you're going to say negative. So notice it puts a negative up here. 2 divided by 3 plus 6 equal, and you get this. Now you may know, some of you may know from a previous course that 0.333 repeating is the fraction 1/3. So this is 5 1/3, just 5 1/3. And then you just change that to an improper fraction. So 5 times 3 is 15, 15 plus 1 is 16, so you get 16 over 3. Now even if you didn't know that, if you did not know that this was 1/3 right here, 0.3 repeating, then use your calculator. You're going to say second, and see, we talked about this before. You see that right above the PRB is that F, fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction. So to get to it though, you got to press second. So you say second, PRB, and you get this, and then press equal, and you get 5 1/3. All right, so make sure you practice with what we just did. So 5 1/3, and so that becomes 16/3. So plus 16/3, and that right here is the equation of the line I'm interested in. So that means this. That means this right here, the equation of this line is what we just had. Negative 1/3 x plus 16/3. All right, so notice these two lines have the same slope, and they have different y-intercepts. So this y-intercept is 2. This is, remember, it's 5 1/3. So if you look at it, it does look like it crosses the y-axis at a third. I mean, at 5 1/3. Okay. All right. So that's what this right here, in terms of the diagram, that's what that means. Okay. Now let's look at number 2. Number 2. All right. So remember, basically, you can do this. You're not going to have time to actually draw all this. So basically, what you want to do is think about what we just did. So if you want to find the equation line that goes to this point and it's parallel to another line, you got to find the slope of the other line, and then that becomes the slope of this line. And then you just take this information, and you plug it back in 2, and you solve for y just like you did in the previous lesson. So we do number 2. Here's number 2. So let's suppose this time that the line passes through. Okay, number 2. The line passes through. I'm going to use the word contains. The line contains the point 4, -2, and is perpendicular to the line whose equation is y equals -4x plus 3. So y equals -4x plus 3. Okay, so now remember, just like before, just think about this. Just like before, you want to find the equation of this line that goes to this point. And remember, in order to use point-slope form, you've got to know the point and the slope. So you know the point of this line. What's the point of that line? It's 4, -2. The problem is, it doesn't tell you what the slope of that line is, but it does say that this line is perpendicular to this line. Well, this line, remember, it's in slope-intercept form already, so the slope of this line here is -4. So the slope of the line I am interested in, I want to find, is, okay, so if this is -4, remember, if two lines are perpendicular, then the slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So if this is -4, then this is going to be a positive, and then take the reciprocal of 4. And so the reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. And so the slope of the line I'm interested in, I want to find, is 1/4. And so, and it contains this point, 4, -2. All right, so I have enough information. I can use point-slope form. So now I'll use point-slope form. Okay, so when you use point slope form, I get y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And then you just plug in. Now remember though, make sure you plug you substitute 4, negative 2 back into x1, y1. Never use y and x. That's going to be the variables in your equation. So this is x1, y1. Okay, so y subtract a negative 2 equals the slope, which is 1/4, times x minus 4. Okay, now remember, rewrite y subtract negative 2 is y plus 2, so that's y plus 2 equals, now go ahead and distribute here, so that's 1/4 x. Alright, now let's think about what this says. Now, that's going to be 1/4 times a negative 4, because remember, this can be written as x plus a negative 4. So don't forget, don't say 4, because if you say 4, you're probably going to say plus 1, and it's not plus 1. Alright, so be careful. So 1 times a negative 4 is a negative 4. 4 times 1, so multiply the denominator, you get 4. And negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. So you actually get a negative 1 instead of 1. So positive times a negative is a negative. Alright, and finally, subtract 2 from both sides. Now, this one's easy to combine. You don't have any fractions here. Combine those to 0, so you have y equals 1/4 x minus 3. Alright, now what you found here was the equation of the line you're interested in. Okay, the equation of the line you're interested in. Now I want you to notice, some students get a little confused. They'll find the slope correctly, and then they'll go ahead and use the same slope, same y-intercept. That's not true. Okay, that's not true. They're going to have different y-intercepts, so you're going to find it using this. Okay, so be careful. Don't say your answer is 1/4 x plus 3 because this is y-intercept 3. They're going to have different y-intercepts. Okay, now let's just real quickly just kind of look to see what it looks like in a graph, just to show you. So let's go ahead and graph this one. So y equals negative 4x plus 3. So we're going to graph y equals negative 4x plus 3. And the slope here is a negative 4 over 1, right as a fraction. And the y-intercept is 3. Now the reason I wanted to write this as a fraction was because we need the rise over run. So the rise is negative 4, the run is 1. Alright, so remember the first thing you do is you're going to graph the y-intercept. You're going to plot the y-intercept. So across the y-axis at 3. And I'm going to use the slope to find the other point. So I'm going to go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then to the right 1. And so I get this. Alright, so then we'll draw the line. And this right here, when I draw this line, the equation of that line is... The equation of this line is this right here, y equals negative 4x plus 3. So that's y equals negative 4x plus 3. Okay, now what I'm interested in though, with what I just found was this. What I'm interested in is the line that goes to the point 4, negative 2. So here's 4, negative 2 right here. And is perpendicular to this line. All right, so here's remember, perpendicular lines, they form right angles. So I'm going to ask you this: could this right here, now you got to visualize me drawing this, could this right here be the line that I'm interested in drawing? You better say no, because if you did, those lines do not form right angles. They got to form right angles. All right, so again, do these two lines right here, when they intersect, do they form right angles? So think. Looks like this. So the question is, do they form right angles? Is that a right angle? No, that's not a right angle. None of those are right angles. All right, so keep drawing it until you think you have, my ruler's too long, until you think you have, oops, right here. I just got to go through this point right here. So keep drawing it. I'm going to put a pencil point here. So keep drawing until you think you have the angle being a right angle. So kind of looks around here, right? Something like this. That looks more like a right angle. All right, so then I draw the line, and I get something like that. Okay? Now, what I found is this. What I found was that remember, these two lines are perpendicular now. So I found the equation of this line, the one I'm interested in. It goes to this point that I want, and it's perpendicular to this line. And I found that equation is y equals 1/4 x minus 3. All right, and notice that the y-intercept is negative 3, and notice it did cross the y-axis at negative 3. Okay? All right, so that is how to find the equation of a line, given that it's parallel to another line or perpendicular to another line. And that's all you do. Okay, it's very similar to the other section, so you got to compare these two sections.